This presentation on veterans with PTSD is presented by Carl Torsbins, retired Deputy Warden of New Mexico and Arizona prison systems, also a Vietnam veteran from 1967 and 1969, and present during the 1968 Tet Offensive. The title, Common Family Problems and Incarceration Risk, will be presented to you in order to get a better understanding of what veterans with PTSD endure. There are many risks associated with being a war veteran. Some of these risks involve the risk of imprisonment in a jail or prisons. It has been reported and is still being said that the military or the ex-soldier says that his military life created problems for him in his personal and civilian life. It's been said that it caused him or her to lose control of many certain situations, including his or her anger and coping capabilities, and that it set him up or her up for failure in life, in marriage, and in mind. According to the VA, veterans are more likely to have problems related to personal relationships, marriages, being sound parents, and possessing poor coping and functional skills dealing with family issues and those issues within our societies. Looking at marriage problems, there are reports of not sharing their thoughts, not sharing their feelings, either with their spouses or with their significant others, and difficulties with personal relationships that appear to be reported around intimacy and other emotional issues that tend to give them lower satisfaction of the relationship they're in or life itself. It must be stressed and emphasized that veterans with PTSD are more prone to experience physical and verbal aggression within their lives and their surroundings. This includes domestic or family violence issues. In addition to this, domestic violence is not just restricted to the immediate family, but extends beyond their support groups and their other circles of families. Regarding violence, veterans with PTSD commit more family violence than any other group of spouses or partners. In marriage, PTSD veterans tend to be divorced twice as much as a non-veteran, and 3 times more likely to divorce 2 or 3 times during their relationships. In addition to the numerous divorces, their relationships are also reported to be shorter than normal, indicative of their problems to handle intimacy, family issues, and emotional issues related to the family circle. It has been reported by ex-soldiers and returning war veterans that post-trauma stress disorder has impacted lower levels of happiness, less satisfaction in their personal lives, excessive disappointment or demoralization, discouragement, and reporting more than 50% of them feel like they're near the rim or at the cusp of a nervous breakdown in their lives. This is not including, of course, the other negative issues of alcohol, drug addiction, and those other things that people tend to seek when they're going through this kind of trauma. Therefore, it's reasonable to conclude that living with a veteran that has or experienced PTSD and has gone through a serious trauma such as a war or other critical incident involves having a high risk of violence within the family setting or circle. Family members and friends must seek effective ways of helping these veterans and assist them in treatment that consist of education for the entire family, not just the veteran. The attendance or the recommendation to attend support groups for both partners in relationships and veterans therapy groups, either individually or as a group. And this, of course, should be done in a preemptive way because family members and friends need to address this matter before a critical incident occurs. You will learn to understand what this means as we go on through the presentation. Veterans inside prisons. The use of this metaphor is most appropriate to describe prison system. 800-pound gorilla. Everybody knows the metaphor about there's a gorilla in the room, usually referred to as a 500-pound gorilla, but when you refer to the prison system, you're talking about an 800-pound gorilla, and approximately $70 to $73 billion worth of money spent by federal, state, and local governments on incarceration costs. Since 1980, the U.S. prison population has developed exponentially, expanding from approximately 500,000 prisoners to 2.3 million people in just 3 decades. America now has the dubious distinction of leading the world in prison population. 25% of all the prisoners in the world, but only 5% of the global population is a shocking statistic. This has impacted our returning war veterans immensely. War veterans have suffered greatly at the hands of a careless and negligent government. At the same time, we have incarcerated a quarter of those veterans returning home from the war after serving their country honorably and suffering great injustices in their ability to cope and function within the normal standards of society after the completion of their service and infliction of numerous pains, diseases, and trauma. And remember that these inflictions of pains and trauma do not necessarily mean they leave scars, because they can be both emotionally and mentally. The system has imposed burdens on them, leaving them with no legal obligation to return them back to a socialized state of mind so they can function as law-abiding citizens and live among the rest of us in a most peaceful and orderly fashion. I think the picture is self-explanatory. I think that those who have been through this can relate to the emotion that's being displayed right now, and hard to deal with. Dealing with the homeless vet. The actual number of homeless veterans will never really fully revealed because it's so hard to track them down. They are nomads, sleeping in alleys, in parks, in boxes, abandoned cars, and in the woods, or other places where they can conceal themselves from society during certain hours of the day. Many of them have mental health issues. Mental health issues such as PTSD, mood disorders, and substance abuse. They've been deemed among the primary risk for homelessness among veterans because of these conditions. The effects of PTSD, including the addiction, the interpersonal problems, and the job loss, are also associated with homelessness. Last but not least is the imprisonment for the mental illnesses connected to the crimes they commit. Impacts to the veterans. The effects of combat exposure doesn't necessarily appear within a short amount of time, for it takes years and years for some to come out and really deal with it and admit that they have a trauma situation and they need to deal with it. Many of these veterans become disoriented and confused as they try to cope with the resettlement of their families and jobs, and yet still deny that it's because of the exposure to the war or the critical incidents that they've endured as a serviceman or servicewoman. Many have become unstable and created terrible situations for themselves or others, often resulting in them being arrested or incarcerated for offenses quite often misunderstood. The irony: these soldiers are at the top of their game when they are suddenly released into a new environment where the rules of engagements have changed and their conduct and behaviors are now altered to meet society's needs and regulations. With the war shutting down in Iraq, hundreds of thousands of people are coming back, and the key word here is the irony. These soldiers are at the top of their game and now have to come back home and change their behavior dramatically. In May 2008, U.S. Medicine reported at least 1,500 Operation Iraq Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom are homeless, and many expect the number to continue to rise. Here's the most shocking fact revealed: is that vets become homeless soon after their return from combat, or actually more homeless than in previous wars. And that's very shocking because the time that it takes for them to become homeless has been reduced down to within 18 months after coming home, compared to the 10 years on the average that it took for us Vietnam veterans. The Nietzsche Iraq Veteran Project and others have reported that veterans are in serious dangers of homelessness, chronic homelessness, resulting in various negative outcomes such as jail or prisons. Looking at the veterans profile, there are statistics available by the Justice Involved Veterans Group that report 1.2 million arrested in 2007. That translates into 9 out of every 100 inmates in the U.S. jails and prison is a veteran. In mid-2007, 9.4% or 223,000 inmates in prisons and jails were veterans. Does not include those that were on community corrections or supervision. 703,000 veterans were incarcerated or supervised in 2007. Mental illness increases this rate that I just mentioned to you by 20 to 49% of the homeless adults reported spent 5 days plus in a jail or city jail in their lifetime. 18% have been incarcerated in a state or federal prison. Many released from jail to prison or incarceration are at risk for homelessness. It is likely to increase the recidivism by a large percentage, and more than 10% of those coming in and out of the prison report homelessness in the months prior. So they're actually going back where they came from. The sources quoted in this presentation come from the Veterans Administration Group and the research that I've done in writing my book, Guerrilla Justice, a book about the homeless veteran, the caged veterans inside of our solitary confinement prisons, available at Exlibris, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and other bookstores. I thank you for your attention, and when you see a veteran, please try to help them out. Please try to understand what they've been through